Okay, looks like we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mission Top. Mission Top is a farmstead and ranch. It is a family. It is a family and a place that is trying to cultivate philosophia, which is a love of wisdom. And today we are going to be talking about today's feeling of disenchantment with institutional religion. This is about the third to the last of a live streams in this project of 90 days of live streams that I've been doing. And so this is just coming to a close. It has been a very fruitful project for me to help me prepare to do a lot of videos of the kind that I most enjoy doing, which is video essays. And so I've been getting more of those out lately. But these streams have been helping me to develop those ideas, and it's been a great pleasure to engage with many of you in that process that have helped hone and further these ideas to get them ready to put into more of a video essay form, which is more how the bulk of followers, I think, of this channel like to experience the ideas. As far as the video that I just put out yesterday, I didn't have a live stream yesterday because I was just putting the finishing touches on a video, and so it just didn't happen as far as the live stream. So I hope that was a worthy exchange once I announced the video. So if you haven't seen it yet, it is a video on Walter Mitty and the fundamental process of change, which I invite you to take a look at. The crucial thing to notice, though, is that it is not on this channel. I made this video for another organization, Ampellis, who I am making some videos for. Ampellis is a company run by one of my high school friends who asked me to come and make some of these videos with them, and I was happy to do so. It's a pretty cool organization. It is a business who, nonetheless, their mission is to help people cultivate meaning in their lives. And so they're trying to figure out ways in which they actually can be a business while simultaneously further that mission. And so the two things that they have going so far, which they ultimately hope to have kind of a span of products, but the two ones that they're doing so far is an addiction recovery service, and then a service that is that helps families pass on not just their wealth but their values to successive generations. In as much as it's difficult enough just to pass on wealth to generations, but the more important thing you could pass on is your values, and many people struggle with that. And so they're trying to offer a means to help people to do that. So what's cool about the Ampellis that I liked about it is that they see that something like a mission like cultivating meaning actually spans across things as broad as helping people pass on values and also to, addiction recovery. And so again, I was happy to be involved with this place, especially because my role with them right now is just to make the very kind of videos that I've made before on this channel, these kind of video essays. I tied this one to a movie, to Walter Mitty. And so if you want to see the video, you can head over to their site. Again, it's Ampellis Life, in fact, so I think they have a few sites. But if you type in on YouTube Walter Mitty Change, I just did that a couple minutes ago and it came up as the second option. And if you type in Walter Mitty Ampellis, Ampellis, it should come up as the first video. So hope you enjoy that one. But let's jump into the category of today's live stream, which is this disenchantment with institutional religion that I think is being felt across our culture today. We keep on hearing mentioned this growing category of the nuns, which is, not referring to like a nun, a Catholic nun, but nuns as in when they fill out surveys or whatnot, they mark none as far as their religious affiliation. And this supposedly, at least in recent years, has been a greatly growing category as many people are leaving institutional religions, while at the same time, people aren't lessening in their desires for spirituality. Certainly people aren't lessening their desires to experience meaning and for being in touch with reality and things like that. And so you'll see, that's another culture-wide thing going on, is that in as much as people leave institutional religions, it doesn't mean people aren't searching for things that can kind of fill that kind of void, whether it's something like yoga, which a lot of people don't realize is rooted in a spiritual practice, or there's all kinds of practices that kind of people are taking out of usually their religious roots and trying to kind of engage in them and see if they can just kind of take them kind of like a salad bar, take a little bit of what you want of different practices and trying to engage with them. Meditation and things like that in all its various forms is another way that that's happening. But the very phenomenon of the fact that people are so disenchanted with religious institutions in particular is very fascinating to me. And I think one of the more important things going on in the world today, in as much as religions have been and continue to be, even for people that don't associate with religions, they continue to be the thing that offers the most comprehensive worldviews or ways of understanding the world, the ways of inculcating values into a society. And so anything this large happening with religions, I think, is very important to explore and understand. Certainly, so myself being religious, I think the best way I can talk about this is share a little bit about my perspective about this from my own experience with my religion, and hopefully it resonates with you as we talk about it. So right here off the bat, for anybody that's listening to this live today, and we've started a little late today because I had difficulty kind of getting things together to start this morning, so I understand if there's not that many people on here live today, but anybody that is on here live and wants to participate, I'd appreciate if you tell me if you are in a formal religion, and if so, if your experience with the institution of that religion, is it good, is it positive, or do you struggle with the institution itself as opposed to let's say the doctrine, the teachings of the religion? So I'd be interested to know that. Maybe we can dialogue a little bit as we go along with the stream. So again, getting back to my experience on all this and why this comes up and why I kind of in a sense can't stop thinking about this, is because one thing, I have children, and I see that many of the people leaving these religions are the younger people, and so of course that concerns me deeply. But in as much as I'm still a younger person, I guess you could say, I also can understand deeply, I think, why a lot of these people are leaving their religions. And I have a lot of friends, a lot of associates, a lot of people who I've grown up with who have left my faith that we were mostly a part of. So I am a Latter-day Saint. I grew up since I was 9 years old in Utah, kind of the Utah Valley, the heart of Latter-day Saintdom, where most kids, like in my high school, were members of this church, and yeah, a fair amount of them over time have left for seemingly a lot of the same reasons as people are leaving faiths of all different sorts. There's some interesting kind of counterexamples to that. Whereas I see a lot of people leaving the faiths of all sorts, and particularly Protestant religions here in the United States. And one thing that's very interesting to me is a lot of the people that I pay attention to. You hear me mention Jonathan Pageau all the time, John Vervaeke, Jordan Peterson. There's some guys doing a podcast called The Lord of Spirits. It's interesting, so many of these people that I've come to listen to, they started out in a American Protestant religion, American or Canadian Protestant religion, evangelical flavor usually of that religion, and they left those some time ago, and then nearly all of them have then moved towards a more traditional version of Christianity, either the Catholic Church or Orthodox Church. So that's a little counterexample that's been interesting to me, of seeing people leave a faith but then be attracted to a different kind of faith. Whereas I think in large part, most people are leaving religions, period. And that's especially what I've seen in people my age and my peers that were members of my church and have left, is that in general they're either not joining religions or not maybe engaging in spiritual practices and things like that, but I don't see them joining up with any other institutional religion as much. I'm sure it does happen. So those are some of the trends that are interesting to me, especially that one of some people who I see, again, leave the kind of Protestant evangelical side of things, but then be attracted to something older and more ancient. And we'll get into that a little bit of why I think that's a little counter example or counter movement that's happening in this, and it is, even though the general trend is all just away from these institutional religions. One thing that you have to understand about me is, from the get-go, that I want you to understand about me, is that currently I am feeling very much this kind of disenchantment, even with my own religion, as far as the institutional aspects. All right, the administrative aspects, the programmed aspects of my church. I mean, my church, like every 6 months, comes out with a new program that we're all supposed to kind of rally around, and very often to me, it's it's very disappointing, the nature of those kind of things. The even the architecture of my faith and whatnot. Again, anything to do with kind of the more administrative, architectural, program aspect of the faith is what I mean by the institutional aspect of things. Whereas at this very same time that I'm feeling that, I've never felt more engaged, with the spiritual, the doctrinal, the sacred text aspect of my faith, the liturgical aspect of my faith, the philosophia of it, that love of wisdom and search for wisdom in it. To understand a little bit about the Latter-day Saint faith, in case you don't know it, we are completely rooted in the very same Bible and Christian story as all other Christians. And so in that vein, we fully accept the Bible as a key component of our religion. And so in that, everything that regular Christianity covers as far as the Bible, the stories of the Bible, the symbolic structure of the Bible, I completely resonate with. And so again, I've never felt more in touch with all of that. It's not just something particular in my faith, but kind of the Christian fervor in general, if you will. I've never felt more of that. And in as much as Christianity is, rooted in the Hebrew Bible, even I've also never felt more turned on by learning more about Judaism as well. And you just had a great time a couple years ago, spending a month and a half in the Holy Land with my family, and focusing on almost more on the Jewish aspect of things there than even the Christian aspect of things, even though of course we did both, just because it's so fascinating to me. So in general, and it doesn't stop there, in general, religion as a whole has just been one of my primary passions in life, from which I've derived a great deal of meaning. So it doesn't stop with Christianity and Judaism. I am interested in basically all religions: Islam, Hinduism, more Asian religions, Buddhism. If only I had the time to fully delve into all of them, I would, because no matter where I look with religion, I find things that are helpful for philosophia, for a love of wisdom, for living a richer and fuller and more meaningful life. So in as much as I see that in all the great religious traditions, I just can't get enough of it. And again, if only I had more time in the day to delve in more to things, and more life to live, because in a biggest sense with religions, you can't just read about them. Of course, you have to live them. You have to participate in them. And if there was a way that I could participate in all of them at once, I would, because my experience thus far in life has been that there are deep, core, important truths and experiences to be had in all these traditions. I'm sure anybody worth their salt could find problems and with each of them and all these institutions. But yeah, as far as just the very nature of religion, again, I want you to know I've never felt more engaged with it, and that includes my own faith. And so, in as much as people might be watching this from my own faith, that's not my style of things, is to find problems with an institutional nature of things and then say, oh well, I'm out of here. Especially when what else have you got going? Have you got something better? And that's the thing I'd ask to anybody leaving an institutional faith these days. It'd be great if you were leaving because you've got something better proved and there that is producing so much more fruit in people's lives. But I just don't see that out in society. Sorry, maybe you can enlighten me and tell me what it is that's out there that everybody's missing. But I don't see that people are leaving these kind of things, problems as they may have, for something better. So I don't think that's the best story of what to do, even if you do find problems with the institutions in this. I see a couple of people have commented. Laurent, hello. And Max, you said, what is your faith? And it is, I'm a Latter-day Saint, so the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as Mormons. But we are asking people not to call us that anymore, in as much as it was never our name. It was more like a nickname, kind of that surfaced there at the very first of our faith in American history, around the 1830s, 40s, when we came onto the scene, and kind of stuck with us. But it's never been the official name of the church, and it kind of deceives you as to what's important to us, which is, our church is centered on Jesus Christ. And so even though the full name is a mouthful, I completely admit, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it more fully tells you what we're about right there, front and center, rather than, Mormons. That kind of sounds a little strange, which of course has been one of the things has been associated with us from the very beginning, is, oh, these people are odd, they don't belong, in regular Christianity, etc. So that's why we're asking people not to call us Mormons anymore. And I thought of making a whole video on that, but maybe for another channel or something. We'll get to that. So anyway, that's my approach to both my faith and religion in general. I'm feeling that in the world right now, that with certain people, there's somewhat of a religious awakening. Anybody that's followed all these thinkers that I have, again, Jordan Peterson, John Vervaeke, Jonathan Pageau, has felt that there's this growing body of people that are thirsting for religious structure, for symbolic interpretations of the world, and using those to get in touch with divinity, with the divine, with a better, with a deeper aspect of reality, with the unseen world around us. And so, anyway, that's important to notice, that at this very same time, it's a very strange time in the world, right, where people are leaving religions, but the people are deeply feeling a need for deep religion, or what religion has done for people in the past. One thing I also want to say is that even though I'm in somewhat, offering a critique, or I will offer a bit of a critique of the administrative aspect, institutional aspect rather, of my religion, the community aspect of it is still one of its best parts, and one of the important parts in my life, in as much as, for myself, my wife, my children, our families, having this community of people to, at the very least, try to live a shared worldview with is very important, and I derive a lot of value from that, from my own faith. And I think that is still, in any faith, one of the best aspects of things, is you can't go it alone in this world. Despite, as we try to, we have to have communities, as flawed as they are. And so I want to also reflect that's one of the reasons I would never leave this community as well, is because, again, you've got to, maybe if there is something better or another tradition that you could somehow fit into, but that's the problem. Oftentimes, you're in a family. This is your family, in as much as, like, for example, with me and my faith, from day one, ever since I've been a little kid, I've been a member of this faith, this family. And so I'm not going to just abandon it, because you can't just join another family kind of willy-nilly like that, despite how our world teaches us, oh, you can have any identity you want, you can pick and choose, and that doesn't really work that way, not at the deep level that I think needs to be there in order to truly participate deeply in a community. So anyway, I wanted to put that out there as well. I see Loren's been commenting, so I want to take a little break and read what you have to say. You say, I never appreciated more my religious teachings and gifts, yet I was also never more disappointed with the institutional part of it. The core tenets are great, in my opinion. So I think we're feeling some of the same things. Please tell me, I'd be interested to know what religious institution, again, you're a part of, and anybody else that's participating. If you feel so inclined, I'd like to know that. And like Laurent, if you're satisfied with the institution of your religion, or if you have difficulties with it. Laurent also says, yet the practical everyday side of it, especially today, has never been more demoralizing. I feel the old religions have failed the world miserably in the case of COVID, adapting the fear-mongering. The same pastor who taught me that the Bible contains 365 phrases of do not be afraid, one for every day of the year, is now trembling and denying Bible classes for unvaccinated adults. And yes, Lauren, I feel that very much with you. It's funny because, yeah, these institutions at their core, I mean, all of them that I know of have things that tell you, fear not, right? And they also, nearly all of them are supposed to give a structure that lets you confront death, right? To accept death, to not see it as something to fear or something to avoid in every instance. Obviously, I don't think people should just die or take their own lives or anything like that. But if you're, for example, you're close to death yourself, you're very elderly and frail and things like that, I wouldn't expect the world to change all around me to save me. I would say, I'm ready to move on to the great beyond, if you will, or whatever way you want to put it. And so that's another thing that's been so disappointing about COVID, is that I see that with very religious people around me, who should have a better attitude, less fear, and a better attitude towards death. Yeah, confronting this whole pandemic with a spirit of fear, and I'm right there with you, being pretty disappointed with that. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, institutional religion today, I think, not just for myself, is struggling and unappealing to many people. And it's important to know that's not just institutional religion; it's nearly all institutions, period, right now. So to be a little more, let's say, forgiving, I guess you could say, to religions right now, it's basically all major institutions that are struggling. We've talked about how we're in a mood of the world where it seems like we're ending a period of history and beginning one, and it's very common in those types of periods for people to be frustrated with the major institutions. So to give a sense of deference and forgiveness to these institutional religions, we should note that it's basically all institutions right now that are suffering the same kind of problems: governments, schools, universities, etc. And I think the biggest problem that they're all dealing with, including the religions, is a feeling of relevance. Okay, that this world is changing so rapidly, and our institutions haven't kept up. They're in essence built for kind of the previous world. And again, we've been talking about this theory of the fourth turning and whatnot, and how when a world is built, it establishes a world. So the last time ours was built was, kind of the major period that we're in was this post-war, right after World War II period. So you could say all of our institutions, including maybe even our religious institutions, are more built out of that period of history. And now that it's coming to end, there is this general feeling that they're struggling with relevance. And it's interesting because, I hear boomers on up as far as age, boomers, the silent generation, and those that are left of the GI generation above them, generally not having as much problem with these institutions. And again, that's because it was built for them and for this time of the world, these institutions. So I have talked about this with my parents, for instance, who say, I'm not seeing the same problems as you. I'm perfectly satisfied. And that makes sense if you realize how institutions can be built for periods of the world and how we're at the end of the period. So that's why they would be failing to feel very relevant to the rapidly changing nature of things, as many things are coming to an end, and new, an idea of a new world, a new period in history is emerging. And so it's kind of a paradoxical thing, because as religions, its institutions see this departure from them. I think many of them are struggling, and saying, okay, well, we need to be relevant then. Let's try to fit more with the youth. How should we do that? Well, what do the youth like? What do the youth feel comfortable with? And so churches will sometimes try to move things, try to change themselves to accommodate more, to be more relevant, change their music, change their liturgies to be more understanding, change the languages, etc. All these things have been movements that have happened. But paradoxically, in as much as churches, the more they've done that, I think the more that they've shown themselves as irrelevant, because if they're trying to copy just things in general culture right now, let's say music, music is a very good example. Even my church, like a month ago, had this program for youth where they're kind of singing more poppy kind of sounding songs, but of course trying to make them spiritual. The evangelical churches have a long history of doing this and trying to kind of, take rock music and things like that and give them spiritual themes. The problem is they never do it as good as regular culture, right? And so in as much as they're trying to be relevant as they do that, it just comes off as subpar compared to the people that do it kind of with a greater intensity and whatnot, in as much, as debauched, I guess you could say, regular culture is. At least they're doing these forms kind of with more intensity and better and more artistry and more skill than when churches, institutions try to copy those kind of same things. So music is a very good example of that. And it just doesn't work, paradoxically. So you can't blame the institutions for not trying to be relevant, but many of their efforts to do so have come flat. And I think what's missing is that underlying everything, if anyone's like me, that the thirst that's out there that people want from their religions right now, and the institutional religions, isn't a making more bland the things, or more palatable, or more contemporary the forms of the religion, but it's actually the exact opposite. That at least, again, I can only speak for myself, but I think I notice enough people around me that what they want right now is a deeper understanding of the religion, a deeper doctrinal exploration. They want higher liturgy, greater ritual, greater ceremony, more beautiful architecture, music that isn't just based in in contemporary kind of forms that come into being and are kind of novel for a while and then fade away just as quickly. We want more lasting musical structures that have more of it's not necessarily an ancient feel, because it's not that they're supposed to sound old, they're supposed to sound timeless, right? As far as music should be. Things that aren't so shallow, things that put you in deeper touch with the structure of reality. So that's where this move towards the greater symbolic understandings of religion, which make claims that say this is a greater a greater account of reality than is something like a scientific materialist account of reality, that has also crept into religions as they've tried to be relevant, right? And so just a couple months ago, I was at this class learning some old world techniques of how to butcher pigs, which I'm looking to do this week. I've been doing some lambs in the last few weeks, and things have been going good. But pig is a bigger animal. Anyway, more skilled. So anyway, I was at this class in Vashon, Washington, to learn old world techniques, and the person teaching that was another one of these people who was once a evangelical, but then left that and was converted to Catholicism. And interestingly enough, this person, in their experience with Catholicism, has even kind of left one part of Catholicism that they thought was trying to again make the church more relevant by changing the music, making the liturgy more understandable by I don't know the exact details, but they've left that part of the Catholic Church, and they were the ones that they've been most attracted to, that they were talking about a lot while I was there with them, was there's this movement within the Catholic Church to move the Mass and the liturgy back to Latin, right? Even though a lot of people don't understand it. So that's very interesting. All the, that whole trend right there. And again, this person is very much right around my age. So it's interesting to see all those movements right there. I see a lot of people interested in Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, who, that was never on my radar at all growing up. And now it's, if anything, the aspect of Christianity that I'm most engaged in, kind of learning the how'd you put it, the viewpoint, or the I guess you could just say that the doctrine, the approach of Orthodox Christianity, and its ancient roots, how that is its whole stance, is that it is the ancient faith, and it hasn't. I think, of course, everything changes, but it is trying not to change and try to identify more with the ancient faith. So I think I could have put that in better terms, but I hope you get the sense of what Eastern Orthodoxy is trying to do, and it's been very interesting to me delving into that, and interestingly enough, finding so many ties to my own faith, which again has given me tremendous insight into my own faith tradition. I find it in my own fascination with temples, with ancient temples of all sorts. You've maybe seen me do a series of videos on these, which I think has confused a lot of people because they don't get as many views. But to me, like, ancient temples are very much, I see that as all tied into this. And even, I found myself more fascinated than ever with Orthodox Jews, Haredi Jews, which are generally known as the ultra-Orthodox. And then right around me in my valley, there's strong communities of Amish and Mennonites who, are known for living kind of their technological level at kind of breaking it off at a certain period and living a more basic, less advanced technological lifestyle. And so all these things, again, have been on my mind, moving me and attracting me, engaging me, which you can see the general trend of those things is all back to a more traditional sense of religion, something more focused in liturgy, something more focused in tradition and timelessness and beauty, rather than trying to be something updated and contemporary. So I see Lorraine has made some more comments, and Max as well, so just wanted to see what you had to say here. So Max says, personally, I do not practice any religion by myself. I have an element of faith. In my opinion, to have faith is to have hope for the future and uphold your moral standards in society. All right, thanks for sharing that, Max. Maybe if you want to, you could also tell us, if there's any practices that you have in your spirituality, let's say, or things that you do that have attracted you in recent years, and why you've been attracted to them. If you have any sort of spiritual practices in your life, that I would also be interested in that. Laurent said, yes, Max is the element that I miss nowadays as well, giving people hope and some positive message to go on with their week. So I agree with that. The other thing that that I have been very engaged with is this notion of a comprehensive story or worldview to live in. So, as much as that sense of hope, you kind of have to have something hope in, and the best way to have that would be to feel like you're in a narrative that's headed towards something hopeful. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. Naza Stark says, Orthodox chants are really different and have that timeless, perfect word, by the way, feel. Yes, just yesterday I was on a drive. Sometimes I just gotten done doing that Walter Mitty video and felt kind of raw. I really don't like editing. It just makes me feel kind of gross. That's one of the reasons I struggle to make videos and get them out on a regular basis. So I just wanted to go on a drive through some of Montana's beautiful nature around me. Of course, I'm doing that in a car on a road, which, there's better ways of doing that. But nonetheless, I needed just some easy experience. I was driving, and that's what I was listening to. I was turning on some Orthodox chant and trying to find, as old of Christian music as I could to just kind of feel it out. And it was very much enjoying those musical forms. Wishing that there was some way to bring more of that back into the world, as we're talking about. So all these things that we're talking about is, I think, why you see across multiple traditions these same kinds of trends happening. So Jordan Peterson is a part of this, and the way that he starts getting all this attention for making lectures about the Bible, of all things. I mean, again, a decade ago, how much would have you been engaged in some professor talking about the Bible? It just, it was a different time even a decade ago, or especially a couple decades ago when I was growing up. The Bible Project is another thing that I've been engaged with on YouTube. Find a lot of their videos and their podcast as engaging. They seem to be Protestant, maybe even an evangelical gentlemen who are in charge of that, but they're again very much pushing things back deep into the text, into the symbolic worldview on many ways, and that deeper structure of things. And so you can't just say that it's only some of these traditions that are feeling like this. I think this is happening across the board, and then you're seeing different manifestations of it from different people. So it's good to give that credit even to kind of the Protestant evangelical world, which tends to get a lot of times, I think a lot of people harp on it the most, and as much as it's been the part that has tried to modernize itself. You can blame this all on the Reformation if you want to and what's come from it. I mean, you can do that, right? And so it gets picked on a lot, but you even see within Protestants and evangelicals these same kind of desires to go back to something deeper and more symbolically structured, right? And then of course the symbolic world led by Jonathan Pageau and his whole movement of people, I find very much in this vein as well. All right, just wanted to read that Max Pawsey says, I've recently started attending a Christian school which promotes praying once a week as a collective through a school assembly. Okay. Yeah, and that's interesting. I'd over time it'd be interesting to hear any of your thoughts on kind of doing that, whether whether you're finding yourself actually participating in it or just kind of observing it. How does that feel from somebody who doesn't have isn't coming exactly from you're embedded in the tradition. In as much as, again, I can only kind of talk from my experience on things, one thing that I found myself doing is I found myself more than ever engaged to the founder of my faith tradition and the history of my faith tradition. And so that would be Joseph Smith, if you guys have ever heard the name of Joseph Smith. So I wanted to say a little bit about the early history of my church. This is not from a preaching aspect at all, and I think you'll feel that. But I want to share this because it relates to this topic. What I'm going to show is that the way that my faith tradition was being lived out in its early history is very different from now. And I think what I'm finding myself yearning for is something more like it was being lived out at the beginning. So my tradition, again, the Latter-day Saints, emerged right at the time of a very important moment in American history, which is known as the Second Great Awakening. The Second Great Awakening, that's probably the best way to put it, which you could liken to something like the 60s, where there's a great awakening of kind of new ideas, counter-cultural ideas, and there's been these different awakenings in different periods of U.S. history, and this was known as the second one, about 80 years after a first one, where there's this general religious fervor going on, and my faith tradition emerged right in a place that was kind of the hot spot of it all, kind of on the frontier America in upstate New York, in a place that became known as the Burnt Over District, because there was so much kind of religious fire and fervor going on in revivals and all these kind of things that it was known as the Burnt Over District, right? And anyway, right at that moment in history, when lots of religious traditions and spiritual movements came out or emerged from in American history, including the Transcendentalist movement, that's where the founder of my faith, Joseph Smith, was living as a generally kind of very little educated youth. Which nonetheless, I think he had a brilliance and a genius and was a natural pattern thinker, right? Somebody who was very imagistic, you could say. And if he would have been born in a different place, in a different time, let's say he's born, next to Oxford University and grew up in a more intellectual culture and things like that, I think might have been a fairly different person. But instead, he grew up in this, this religious fervor period, on the borders of kind of American society on the frontier, where there was nonetheless a very mystical culture still existing, much like you find kind of documented in the Scottish Highlands per se, where there's much more of a belief in mystical things. There's treasure hunting, there's people claiming powers and things like that, and that's how he grew up, in religious fervor plus the mystical culture, plus being just a naturally patterned imagistic thinker. And all these things affected him. And then his education primarily being the King James Bible. And this guy, he would read and engage in the King James Bible, and I think he saw the patterned structure of it much better than most people do. So if you can imagine that kind of mix of things, what's a natural result? Well, you can imagine for certain types of people, they get all these inputs into them, and then outputs must come out, kind of combinings of these different things. This is kind of my outside of my own faith way of describing what happened here. So very much like somebody who feels like, a muse is working through them, or to produce a work of music or a work of fiction or something like that. Joseph Smith very much felt like he was being inspired from God, and out came from him revelations, kind of prophetic revelations, a whole book, the Book of Mormon, that gives, this whole account of religious peoples here in the Americas. And that was his claim. And I completely believe him in his claim that he felt as if God was working through him, and out was coming this stuff, and he couldn't, stop it. And, I don't find that hard to believe, because people experience those kinds of things all the time. Again, whether with works of literature or music, or some person's magnum opus that they produce, and they said, like, I don't know, this just kind of came out of me, and they can't even describe how it's working. Again, that's what I think was very much working in Joseph Smith. So out comes all this religious ideas, which he says, I don't expect you to believe it. That's a thing of adhering to the faith and whatnot. But just to kind of give you an account, he very much says this is coming from God. I have no other explanation for this. And people start paying attention to it, and are engaged with what he's doing. And again, it's all based in the patterns of the Bible, but giving, even as much as he's not a person constrained by, again, a Harvard or an Oxford or a Catholic church or some great institution telling him, no, here's the bounds of how this needs to be interpreted. Here's the acceptable forms. Here's the scholarly translation of this. He doesn't have any of that. So instead, again, he is consuming all this. He is a pattern thinker, imagistic thinker, and out comes, new religious flourish to the same basic Christianity and biblical ideas. I mean, very much, again, my faith is rooted in Christianity, and its core tenets are the basic Christian tenets. Again, with flourishes on them, you could say. All right, so this turns a lot of people on at the time. Again, it was this time of religious fervor. And very soon, these people get engaged in a massive project, which was to establish the New Jerusalem in the Americas, a new holy city. They're looking at the Bible. They're seeing this notion of a New Jerusalem being established before Christ comes again. And they're saying, well, we are the people to do that, and we're going to do that. And they seek to do this here in the Americas. They identify a place in Missouri where they think it's going to do, and then the whole movement turns to trying to establish this holy city. They're calling it Zion, or Zion, whichever way you want to say it, and they're trying to establish it. Okay, so the reason I share that with you, again, is not to kind of convert you to the story, but to show you how this kind of thing works, and how, if you can imagine yourself in early America, we're only 30 years after the Constitution of America, of the United States, was signed. So you're here in early America on the frontier, in a deeply religious fervor environment, with somebody who is coming out, with revelation from God, and it has a coherent structure to it. And then this revelation says, you are the people that need to establish a new holy city. You could see how, to some people, because of course it's not all of society, but to some people that would be pretty dang engaging, right? Because it gives an engaging, comprehensive story for you to live in. It gives meaning to every moment of your life, because you say, yeah, look, this is the most important thing in the world, and now I know what to do every day, all day. I need to arrange things to try to make this great project happen with a greater community of people. All right. You could see how compared to our lives today, in which we have, just this society focused on consuming and pleasure and all that, that actually seems like, at least to somebody like me, that would be a pretty cool project to be engaged in if you believed in it. And again, I'm not here to push any certain aspect of religious belief. I'm just trying to illustrate that. Okay. So in essence, they knew who they were, they knew what was important, and that they were living in a story with massive stakes and great forces weighed against them. Very much the kind of stories that people love to engage in today, whether it's Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, etc. And it was real, right? Because here's the thing, is that every place that they moved to with this notion of establishing a holy city, and if you can imagine, anywhere in the world today, a group of a couple thousand people showing up into a community, a fairly small community, and saying, we're here to establish the holy city, and they all vote the same, and they have strange practices. Anywhere in the world today, people show up and do that, and especially when they start impacting things politically and stuff, that people would want to run them out of there. And that's exactly what happened to my people. Wherever they went, because they were so different, because they're engaged in this project that wasn't in line with everybody else, people want to run them out. And so they had to move various places, various times. Eventually, after they were run out the last time in Nauvoo, Illinois, and that's where Joseph Smith was also murdered and martyred, as far as our church sees it. Finally, they decided, this hasn't worked because we've been too intertwined here with the rest of American society. And so they take off on a huge journey into the wilderness, you could say, and end up in what was then Mexico. Of course, today it's Utah, but at the time they went out there, it was yet to be United States territory. It was still belonging to Mexico. So they essentially left, the United States in order to try to find a place where they could continue their project, right? And so to just kind of wrap this period of history up and see why it's not like that today. Eventually, they come out to Utah, they settle much of the western United States, or at least they're major players in the history of the western United States, and that's probably where you've heard, most of about Mormons or Latter-day Saints and being in the West and Brigham Young and polygamy and these kind of things. Because yes, there was polygamy going on. That's a whole nother topic to address it at a different time. So I can understand why people saw these people as strange and different. But anyway, they get going on their project, but eventually the United States kind of comes to them, right? And pretty soon they're back in United States territory and dealing with this same problem of clashing with the general culture of the United States. And so eventually a decision was made within the church. And you can see it very kind of clearly at a certain specific period of time. They said, you know what, we need to, if we're going to survive as a people, because it was very much down to the fact of armies, United States Army coming out to try to stop, Mormon practices and different things like that. If they're going to survive as a people, we need to kind of get in line with regular society, if you will. And so that's when polygamy was abandoned in the faith. But more important than that, that's where there was this kind of Americanization of this faith tradition, where before they had voted as a block, of people, which is kind of very not American to have a whole religion all voting wherever they went in just one way and things like that, which is one reason people didn't like them. So they were actually instructed, like whole congregations were said, okay, you guys are now Democrats, you guys are now Republicans. There was this great effort to turn the people of the church more into regular American citizens. And so funny enough, it worked, and it worked so well that the kind of eventually the identity of the church became we're more American than anybody else. And so if you look at the whole first part of the history of the church, it was more focused on being, they were kind of the radical progressives, if you will, envisioning new ways of organizing society and being disenchanted with the way things were in society there. And they have these radical new ideas, new sexual relationships and all these kind of things. So they were the radical progressives. Well, after this period, they kind of become the radical conservatives in the small c conservative kind of way, where from then on in religious history, they become known as, kind of the more traditionalists in American society, to the point of kind of being weird because as a faith, we're kind of more conservative than everyone else. We're kind of 30, 40 years behind the times, if you will. And that's where, from then on, you start knowing, the Mormons tied up with the Boy Scouts and kind of having this, Ned Flanders kind of personality from The Simpsons of kind of a clean uprightness, good citizens, etc. from that point on, which is still defined kind of, again, the institutional church that I've grown up in with the Latter-day Saints. So why do I share all this? Because I look back at that beginning period, the beginning period of a group of people giving their all, their lives, even being willing to sacrifice their lives, but all their energy, everything into a comprehensive, religious project, way of life, living within a comprehensive religious story. And, I sense a little bit of longing for that kind of thing, of doing that with other people. Again, you can quibble about of course, the difficulty is always the nature of the actual project, establishing some holy city or some holy society or something like that. Those utopian projects in the United States have generally all not succeeded. Even while there's some communities that do it. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Bruderhof, which is another German religious tradition that came out of the Anabaptist movement, that's but came out of the same Anabaptist movement that ended up splintering into the Amish, the Mennonites, and the Bruderhof. Well, the Bruderhof, have lived in a comprehensive religious society, kind of not a utopian society, but one where everybody gives up, all of their own possessions and works for the good of the society and whatnot. Again, you could probably tell me, oh, well, here's something they've got wrong in this or wrong in that, or somebody's been abused here or this or that. Probably, and as much as that happens in every organization. But I'm just trying to point out that some religious communities do this, and even though I myself could never be, I think, one of the members of any of these traditions, I'm trying to explain how these attract me. Just like I'm fascinated by Haredi Jews, etc. These deeper, more traditional societies that are more able to live as cohesive societies, as I think would be the ideal in communities. If you can imagine kind of the medieval town or village where, you have a group of people living a more shared worldview with their church and their town hall right there at the middle of the church. That's very different from today. Like in every Montana small town here, there's 5 to 10 churches, just Christian churches, in every town. And very different flavor in each one of those Christian churches. And, even though there are things that bring people together, such as like high school sports is one thing, but there's a strong sense of community around here. There's also just in society in general, so many splintering aspects to the world that these kinds of other, more comprehensive stories and worldviews to live in seem so impossible right now, I guess you could say, right? So again, I'm sharing that story of my own faith just to kind of illustrate, the dilemma of today, where, let's say here at Mission Top, what we're trying to do is to live out a comprehensive worldview rooted in our own religious tradition, rooted in Christianity, rooted in the Bible, but also rooted in the flourishes that come out of my own religious tradition. And so everything we do, like here at Mission Top as a family, everything from the food that we're eating, the clothes that we're doing, the way that we're interacting with our animals, the way that we're raising our food, the way that we interact with the land, what we're trying to focus our lives around, the togetherness we're trying to have as a family, the music we're trying to cultivate, it all focuses, it's all centered down into the religious tradition. okay, or the doctrine, the spiritual aspects, the symbolic structure, you could say, because we're trying to map reality, as it were. But even in my own faith, like, there's not a lot of people that think that way, right? They are more devoted to the institutional nature of the religion. So even though I feel great community with people, like even in my own faith, like it's very difficult to feel who's rooted down in the again, the symbolic structure of the religion, and who's more devoted to kind of just the community and the forms found in the institutional church, right? Who is kind of living this through and through 100, every moment of their lives, or at least trying to, because nobody is ever going to do it perfectly, and who just kind of shows up at those moments on Sunday because it's their community, it's their tradition, it's what they've always done. And in as much as that's the situation, well, then what it ends up being is that for somebody like me, who I would love to be doing this with other people, the question is who, right? Because I almost feel more of a kinship with people of other religious traditions who are living in this way, who are trying to find a comprehensive way of life to live in, than I do members of my own tradition who don't see things that way at all, who basically are living regular societal life, their careers, their homes, their the regular way of life today. And then, they show up to church and they're good members of the church and they obey the rules and things like that, but they don't see things the same way in terms of trying to make this something like the early faith was in my church, where it was a comprehensive way of life, if you will. And so that leaves me, I see there's a lot of activity on the chat. I'm very much looking forward to getting into that, but just to kind of wrap things up today, that leaves me with a sense of, what do you do today, right? If you want to live this way with other people, where you are living alongside people who are engaged in the same comprehensive worldview, but our society is so fractured that even people like you, that in many ways share your worldview, might be of some other religious tradition, and so that creates its own complications, as it were, because you can't then make the religion the shared part of the worldview as well, which it would kind of need to be, in as much as you want to be able to do a liturgy together, you want to be able to sing the same songs together, and whatnot, and you want to be able to share the same festivals and celebrate the same festivals, listen to the same music, dance the same dances that come rooted from your tradition. What if that's not there in the institution of your that would be a massive undertaking to be able to do that and actually fit in it, right? And so that's where I find myself today, again, disenchanted with institutional religion as it is, wanting deeply to live out more the comprehensive worldview offered in the Bible, in Christianity. And it's on offer in all the religious traditions, but then finding myself with with who? So you find yourself alone very much, right? And one of the things we talk about here, my wife and I, is that even if there was, 2 or 3 other families that were willing to live close by and get, we're members of our faith tradition and we're fully engaged in this as we're trying to be, I mean, man, that would be such a blessing, such a feeling of now we have a little community. And I'm not saying, just in case there's anybody from my local congregation, there's some people that I very much feel like that with in my local congregation. So I'm not saying that that's not already there to an extent. But to have, just a couple more families to do this with, man, that would be such a blessing. Whereas right now you kind of feel like you're going it a bit alone, which is weird because you feel like you're trying to live out, deeply your faith tradition, which should be shared by so many people. Millions of people supposedly are supposed to be able to share this with you, and it's very weird to not feel that. All right, so that's all I had to say today. Again, I'm looking forward to seeing what other comments have been made. Looks like by Naza and Max and Laurent. But anybody else that's out there that wants to participate in this, please do. Or if you're watching this after the fact and want to leave some comments, it takes me a long time sometimes, but I do respond to comments. I don't just delete them, and I do always read them as well. So please do participate. I'm interested in your thoughts, your own religious traditions, whether you have these same struggles or not. Very much just interested in your own experiences on this. All right, Max says, the unity that is created through these exercises has made me question my own faith and what it means. However, studying Tsarist Russia, I've learned that these practices were used to control the dark masses, peasants. The exploitation of religion has prevented me from ever fully believing in God. So, yeah, I can understand that. I mean, any mass movement, can be used for good, can be used for ill, and for certainly throughout history, even religion has been used that way. So I can understand that. And that's where, again, part of the difficulty of today, one of the reasons some people are leaving their religious institutions is because they're seeing fundamental flaws in them like that. Let's say you're Catholic and you see, that's the most prescient example that's in our minds, as far as a major religious scandal, you could say, is all the abuse that was unveiled there in the Catholic Church. And people see, well, hey, if that could happen, then within this institution, how could I still be a part of it? But then every religious institution, you're going to find things like that, right? I don't know of any pure one that doesn't. You won't eventually find some sort of problem like that. So yeah, what do you do? And it is a big problem. In as much as today the internet and media and stuff make sure all this stuff comes to light, which in essence it should. That should be a new reality all institutions have to face up to, is this stuff can't just be hidden away. But it doesn't help solve the problem, right? Which is, how do you devote yourself when you also see these kinds of things within them? So it's a good point, Max. Loran says, does sound dark, Max, you are right, but consider this, that the Tsarist Russia was still better and more humane for the masses than the Russia that came after it. It brings up that Russia is another one of those things that me growing up as a typical kid in the 80s and 90s, of course, my experience of Russia was as the villain, in every James Bond film or movie or things like that, or, communist Russia and this or that. So it's only been recently that I've been able to kind of try to delve into the more complete history of Russia, and have liked very much what I've seen in the culture, in the religion, and as much as it's been tied to Eastern Orthodoxy and trying to understand that, the dance, the culture, everything to it. But I feel like I barely skimmed the surface. So I wish I knew more about the nature of Russia and things like that. But it's something that I, again, very much wish I had more time in the day to read, and more lives, I guess you could say, to live, to delve myself in. I would love to delve into all these different cultures and feel what it's actually like to be inside of them, right? Because that's the only way to really know them. Max said, I suppose you're right, Laurent. Max says, religion was never the problem in Russia, but it was instead modernism, which was breaking through medieval ideology. Lenin's promotion of Leninism destroyed the feudal system. Though religion remained intact, it was not nearly as controlling over Russia as before. In my opinion, this was extremely positive because it allowed freedom of belief for the masses. So, again, you know much more about that history than I do, but interesting points nonetheless. Laurent says, to be fair, the feudal system needed to be changed, but they threw out the baby with the bathwater. They destroyed the moral standards of society. You mentioned as well, human life became secondary, and the party and proletariat essentially became the church and God. And Max said, yes, it's unfortunate. So good. I'm glad you had that discussion on that. Again, I wish I had more to say, which I don't, just because I don't know the history as well. But I'm pleased that both you do. But I will say, in as much as that, that's what we do today. And we can look at our cultures, our societies, and try to see what has happened, what was good from there that we long for, right, to get back to. Because I think that underlies what your discussion is there, and what can't exactly go back. Because, even as I'm putting out my faith tradition and saying that I feel this longing to be back in the way that it must have felt there near to its beginning. Of course, there was problems there from the very beginning. They were trying to establish this holy city, Zion, and prepare for the second coming of Christ, of the Messiah, but it didn't work, right? they get driven out of the place where they were going to establish that city, and the second coming didn't happen, and they had to deal with that. And many people were leaving the church even right then because of those difficulties and the other difficulties, such as, again, they were the leaders were living out this form of polygamy, which, as it was getting out, was troubling people deeply, and also people were leaving for that, which also led to the death of the founder, Joseph Smith. So things weren't all rosy at those moments either, and there's reasons why ultimately the initial project didn't pan out. So yeah, as you take it to today, of course, what I want to do is not establish the holy city, Zion, right around me, or some utopia or some things like that, because that kind of feeling has died out as not being exactly the answer. But what I do long for, again, is just a small community of people in which to live a comprehensive worldview out. It doesn't have to be focused on, it should not be focused on creating some sort of utopia or something like that, but rather just a shared life around shared values. Like, that's the basic thing that I want and hope for today. But in such a fractured society, where even within the institutions, there's all these different splinters of kinds of people and whatnot, it is very difficult today to know how to do that, right? And so you're left. I think that's the state of the world today. We're all waiting for something to solve this problem, if you will, of what to do about the fractured nature of society and our inability to find deep, true community in our lives. And maybe the answer is right around the corner, but as we've been talking about, anytime there's a great turning over of the world, there's usually a lot of trauma associated with such great change as well. So that's maybe the thing to be careful which we wish for, because if we want a world that is more unified around some new, let's say, a new way of presenting society in ways that everybody can get behind, either one, that may only come about after a great deal of suffering first, which gives reason for people to then unify themselves around something new, or there's always the possibility that things turn over into something even worse, right? That is also a possibility. That a next new world doesn't always mean that it's going to be a better one. And so, that's where somebody like me is left, just trying to make things happen at the level of their family and and people as I can in my community. Try to, if anything, engage people in an attractive worldview. With me, it's focused around all these things that I've talked about, a way of raising food, a way of celebrating and festival. I'm hoping at the end of this month of June to have over everybody we know to do whole animal barbecue or roasting of lambs and some pigs and stuff like that, and just have a true feast, right? Something that's not just paper plates and kind of a cheap frozen hamburger kind of barbecue or something like that, but like a true feast in the way that feasts are supposed to happen. But of course, it would be even nicer if there was some sort of community, festival, some religious festival where we're celebrating some specific thing in some specific way of why we're doing this all together. And hopefully over time, maybe in the future, I'll be able to do that on Easter or something, to do that with lambs and whatnot. But you see the kind of the dilemma, in as much as I'm trying to figure out how to create that kind of community while struggling to figure out the ways to get everybody around some unified point of meaning within it, I guess you could say. So that's all I had to say today. Thank you for those that participated, Max and Naza and Laurent. Let's see, you have a last comment there. Max, true communism is impossible, but unity in a split society is the answer. Though this is also near impossible. The world is constantly divided, and to try to unify it is an extreme challenge. Yeah, so you could say, like, communism was the opposite side of this, where there was this answer of this unifying thing that was supposed to unify everything. And of course, that can go very badly too. So then we have this other answer, pluralism, where everybody gets to live out how they want to, but then that in its extreme also goes wrong, as things just splinter and splinter and splinter, and everybody's just looking to fulfill their own personal measure of happiness and identify themselves as whatever they want to be and whatnot also has all of its own problems, right? So these are the times we live in, and I guess it's becoming of us to do our best and to try to live out the best we can, create community in the places we can, and look for new possibility in the future as we ride whatever changes might be coming. So hope this was fruitful for you today. It definitely was to me, to just try to get these ideas out, and I look forward to any other feedback from you and comments and whatnot on this. But I'm going to sign off for now. Thanks for being here. So this is Gary signing off from Mission Top. Hope you have a great day in whatever part of the world you find yourself in. We'll see you later.